And a big run right here by H.M. Breaking tackles, downfield he goes.
Not a successful area for them.
3rd and 2 out of the backfield. It's Hill. Oh, he got by 1. 3rd down 8. Going deep, and he has the completion. Into 6 defensive backs. He'll swing one to the 10. It's Hill.
Hey guys, welcome back. Eric Smith here, 5 Reasons Sports contributor, also co-host of Scouting the Fins, and you can find that one on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel and also the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed. It's kind of nice to come back and be able to do these offensive line review videos after a win. At the same time, I want to caution you from getting too excited over the offensive line's performance. It was definitely one of the better ones of the season, but maybe not quite as dominant as it might have seemed based on the score overall. As always, I grade every single play for every offensive lineman. A average offensive line grade for an individual is 5.00. And what you see on the screen here is the 5 guys who started and their grades so far for this season, their average. The other guys that played in the game, Brunskill, I didn't grade his 6th offensive line snaps. Also had Kendall Lamb and Keon Smith getting some action, but they did not get enough plays to grade, and that's why they are not on here. But the overall grade for the offensive line came in at a 5.54 from yesterday. And like I said, 5.00 is considered average for an individual's grade. So this is a pretty good grade. Not the best one they've had this season, but far from the worst. Definitely something to continue to grow on. The big thing this week is that there wasn't a whole lot of clean losses. There wasn't a lot of plays that I graded as a 0. There was still plenty of, partial credit grades. So still a lot of room to improve and still need to see it against some other defenses. But overall was an encouraging performance, but not one that I'm going to say this offensive line is completely fixed. And we'll talk about some of those reasons as we go through individual grades. As usual, we are going to start from the lowest graded player and work our way up. Lowest graded player for this week was Patrick Paul, coming in at 3.67, close to a season low, not quite a season low. I think week 2 was a little worse for him. But the big thing here is that this is heavily impacted by the 2 false start penalties that he had. If you take those out, then his average is going to come out a lot closer to his season average. And, looking through his plays, other than the 2 false starts, he only had 1 play that was a full negative 0. That was an outside zone run that was late in the game when he was on the backside of it. But other than that, just a couple partial negatives, a solid game overall from Patrick Paul. Just, grades skewed a little low because of those false start penalties. The kind of outlier game that when you look at the grades over the course of the season will balance out. But, for this game, he was the lowest graded individual. Our next lowest graded player is going to be Jonah Savaiinaya, coming in at 4.19. And, like we talked about already, 5.00 is average. So even though it's the second worst score in this game, it's not far from an average offensive line score. It's actually his second best game of the season. I had week 1 versus the Colts graded a little better. I think they were probably able to give him a little more help in that game, and that aided in that week 1 grade. They haven't really been able to do that since then. So nice to see him, getting back close to an average offensive line grade. He only had one play throughout the entire game, which kind of like Paul was late in the game. That was a full negative, which was a duo run to the left side that was late in the game. The rest of it was just, a bunch of partial negative grades, stuff that can continue to be cleaned up. So overall, thought this was a good performance from Jonah, but, maybe not quite as good as the way the broadcast was making it seem. But, at this point, we'll take any positive signs from Jonah moving in the right direction. I think that's what we got yesterday, and looking forward to seeing that hopefully continue on Thursday versus the Ravens. And then our next player is going to be the other guard. So that's going to be right guard Cole Strange coming in at 6.09, by far his best grade of the season. And we're going to talk a little bit about how the right side of the line was helped when we talk about Larry Borum. But from a run game perspective, they ran very little outside zone this week. And I think that really helped with Cole Strange not being put in positions that he's not necessarily, ready for at this point in this offense. Not a whole lot of, just clean losses for him, but protected by the play calls, both in the run and the pass game. But coming in at a above average grade based on what they asked him to do, and that is growth from Mike McDaniel in terms of play calling, in terms of adjusting to the guys that he has on the field and putting them in position to be successful. And then next one here is going to be Larry Borum, and he came in at a 6.68, so above average. But like I just said with Cole Strange, very protected by the play calls. Only had one full negative grade, which was a long trap to his side, so he would have been asked to down block and just didn't do a good job on that. The rest of it was either runs to the right side in his direction, and there was also one inside zone to the left where he's more of a cutoff type guy that he got a partial negative grade on. So it was really protected a lot in terms of the play calling. Of your drop back pass protections, there was 12 of them, and over half of them had protection that was slid to that right side to Cole Strange, Larry Borum. And I even noticed that, on some of the ones where they were sliding to the left, they were still giving Larry Borum some additional help, whether it was a running back releasing through the B gap so that Borum could focus more on the outside rush, or a running back releasing to the outside where Borum could, be a little more concerned about the inside move because he had that chip to the outside. And even in the run game, looking at the different concepts, like it was built in a way that didn't completely avoid the right side the way that they did a few games ago, but it did still protect them. We look at the duo calls. There was 7 of them that I had charted going to the left, only one of them going to the right. Only 2 plays that were outside zone runs to the right. They did other stuff to the right, like pin and pull, where they're asking him to block down, some long traps where they're asking him to block down. So again, just felt like the right side is grading well recently, but it has more to do with the protection and the play calls than it does these individual players necessarily being, making huge strides. And I still think that once we get, hopefully getting James Daniels and Austin Jackson back on the right side of this line opens up the playbook where they don't have to protect the right side of the line quite as much. And then our highest grade player of the week is going to be Aaron Brewer, coming in at 8.39, which just barely eclipses his previous season high of 8.32, which came in week 6 against the Chargers. I think this is kind of a reinforcement that when he has good guard play around him, Aaron Brewer is, probably top 3 centers in the NFL. Lots of videos shared of him on X of the screen pass going to the left side where he got out there and picked off the cornerback. I also shared one of, I believe it was a crack toss going to the left side where he does a great job of getting in space and locating that linebacker. So he's going to be a solid player no matter what. But when you can get decent guard play on either side of him, where he doesn't have to help them quite as much, that's where you're going to really see him soar and play at a All Pro level. And that's what we had in this game, and hopefully can see that going forward as well. So as you can see, this kind of shows why the grade came in just above uh, an average grade of the 5.54 was the overall grade. We had one really good performance in Aaron Brewer. We didn't have any awful performances, nothing, down the ones or the twos. Patrick Paul being the lowest at a 3.67, but everybody else was, kind of near average. And that's good enough. When you can get that across the board, then you're going to, result in some good stuff on the field as well. But there is still a lot of room for growth and improvement on this offensive line, but certainly an encouraging performance overall, and hoping they don't change the game plan too much. They didn't run a lot of outside zone for the first time this week, and with the short week, turn around on Thursday to have the Ravens come to town. Hoping they keep a very similar game plan and that it protects the line the way that it did against the Falcons. Now, as we get into the film review portion of it, like I said, I didn't grade Daniel Brunskill's snaps as the sixth offensive lineman, and he didn't have enough snaps at center to get a grade displayed this week. But we are going to go through every one of those sixth offensive line snaps and kind of take a look and see how effective that was and whether it's something that we should hope to see as we move forward in the season. All right, as we get into the Daniel Brunskill six offensive line reps here, first one's going to be very simple, just a pass play, and Brunskill is asked to block that defensive end. As you can see here, going to be fairly uneventful, never really rushes. Brunskill, a little late, maybe trying to go find some help to help out Patrick Paul, but first time in here as a wing type player. You can see off the bat when Tua talks about feeling more comfortable, having Daniel Brunskill out there on the edge probably feels a lot more comfortable if that defender does come than it would with somebody like Tanner Connor, given what they had this week. And then next one here, this is going to be a counter, so we're not going to get too much into everything else, but Cole Strange is going to trip. But on this one, we get Brunskill blocking down. We can see the effectiveness of having, a bit of a bigger body on this type of play coming down on that down block. Patrick Paul engages, and you can see that Brunskill is able to get in there and just toss that defender completely, and then on the way to pick up the next thing in terms of cutoff. So definitely can see the benefit to bringing in the sixth offensive line on this type of play where, we don't always get that type of push when we have a regular Y tight end in there on these counter plays. And now we're going to get a counter to the right, but it's going to be pass pro. So you're going to get Jonah coming across and also Brunskill. And there's been some discussion about the angle of the guard on this. On this one, looks to me like Jonah is trying to get a little deeper for Brunskill to get underneath. It's all about just knowing where your help is. Probably if it's a more athletic guy, you want to try to get them over the top with Brunskill, just having him able to let Jonah get deeper and to make sure that his inside half is covered is a little more important there. So again, not a whole lot to gain from Brunskill on here, but pulling across, you can see Jonah's kind of got that outside position. If that player, the edge player here, were to come to the inside, he's going to run directly into Daniel Brunskill. Brunskill ends up running into Borum, which probably isn't ideal, but I think he's just trying to help create that wall to let Tua run out. But just a little difference in the usage of what you have with a sixth offensive line doing that versus what we see with an F or a Y type player executing that same concept. Now we're getting similar to earlier a power long trap type concept where we're getting Ingold's kicking out the end and Strange is coming around and leading up through. So we're getting everybody else is just blocking down here. And you can see again that Daniel Brunskill is really being aggressive on this down block, trying to clear it out, right? Ideally, we get Ingold kicking out there. We get Strange coming around to pick up 55. And we'd get Brunskill to number 40, which does happen, right? And he ends up putting him on the ground. But, just the way that he's helping Paul here ends up knocking Paul off of the block more than it helps. I think this was a third and short, might not have quite converted. I think it follows up with a 4th and 1 conversion here, but can still see the benefit of having that big body coming down on that down block to clear it out for the kick out blocks. Just maybe some execution to clean up there so that we're getting more of the defender and less of Patrick Paul as he's blocking down there, if this is something we see them continue to do moving forward. Here we are going to get a outside zone to the right, play action outside zone to the right. And Brunskill over here is the tight end, is going to be one-on-one with the defensive end here. And you can see he's going to do a really good job on this defensive end, able to stay with him, moving his feet, staying in front. And back to what we talked about on the first play, you can see how Tua can have a lot more confidence in that. Feet are active, eyes are not down on number 17 here. right? Because he's got more confidence in Brunskill being able to sustain this block versus some of the tight ends we've had out there, and that's going to result in uh, a nice pass to Waddle that should have been caught there, but goes back to what Tua was saying at the press conference afterwards about feeling more comfortable in pass protection having Brunskill out there. This is going to be inside zone to the left. And you can see initially the combo is here, but Brunskill's doing a good job of protecting that inside. There's nothing, no immediate threat here for him. You're going to have the tight end blocking out here. This combo is going to work up to there. In a perfect world, you would have him check and then work out there. But as you can see, this defensive tackle is going to slant across. And because of Brunskill just kind of taking his time, right? Jonah's not going to really be able to get in to help Patrick Paul, so he's going to climb to 40. But Brunskill, because he's not releasing too early, is able to help here. And then he's ultimately going to be the reason that this turns into a solid game. Never gets up to number 21, but when we're talking about inside zone, what you want to get is vertical movement. Would have been tough for Patrick Paul to get that vertical movement with the way this was. And had we not gotten vertical push, then 99 may have been able to slide over and make the play off of Aaron Brewer there. But Brunskill does a good job of finishing the block. Probably not something, again, that we are going to get out of a tight end in there as the defensive tackle is slanting into his face. All right, here we're going to get some more pass protection, and I would not have pictured Dan Brunskill as being an effective tackle, but he's got a few reps in this game where he's lined up as a Y, right? So really doesn't have any help outside, similar to what you'd see in an offensive tackle, and he's doing a good enough job out here. Again, right? You can see why Tua is more comfortable with him in the pocket because you got an extra offensive lineman out there. You can help Jonah with Patrick Paul. You can help Cole Strange and Larry Bourne by letting them go 2v1 just because you have an extra offensive lineman out there and you don't have to give any help to your basically a pseudo tight end out here. All right, we're actually going to get the big guy in motion this time, coming across in some split flow action. That's going to be a crack toss to the right, so it really doesn't have to do a whole lot on this play. Just coming across to pick up the defensive end out here. This guy's going to slant to the inside, so it's the next one up, and really just want to prevent him from being able to, basically scream around the backside and be a factor in this play. And you see that's exactly what Brunskill does on here. Comes in motion. Ideally, obviously, you would make some contact here, but the big thing is you don't want to let him spike underneath and get flat down the line. So Brunskill makes him go, a little bit wider. Again, not ideal if we're going to continue to see this. Going to need to see Brunskill execute these split flow blocks a little better. Late motion might have thrown him off, or late shift might have thrown him off a little bit here, but not something I'm going to, be too concerned about with in his first game as a sixth offensive lineman and one of the first times that he came in motion looking to execute that split flow block. This is going to be outside zone to the right. And this is a type of block that we see the Dolphins trying to execute with their Y and their F often, where the Y will chip the edge player and climb, and then the F will take that over. And I think it's one of those things that is going to require a lot of practice. We still see our Y's kind of messing it up. And you can see here that, Brunskill's taking outside zone steps as if he's an offensive lineman. That defender spikes to the inside. He does give a little bit of a shove, but maybe not enough to help Ingold as much as would have liked there. Patrick Paul was the biggest issue on this play. But, would maybe like to see Dan Brunskill giving a little more help on the inside there, or just let him seal that guy to the inside and let Ingold lead around. But another, type of thing that Brunskill has not been asked to do. They don't really do this with the offensive linemen because you don't have somebody leading from the backfield. So if Brunskill is going to continue to play this sixth offensive lineman in the Y position, this is going to be something they're going to need to continue to get reps with, where Brunskill can give a little more help, before he's climbing to the next level and make sure we're securing that first level block. Now we're going to get him out on a wide receiver screen out here to the left, kind of a tunnel screen. And this is something that he's familiar with playing on the offensive line. So he's just going to release under the edge player, get out wide, kicking out the corner or outside linebacker, safety, whatever that was out there. Would obviously like to see him be a little lower, be a little more explosive. We've seen Aaron Brewer absolutely demolish these guys, but in the end, Malik makes a play here, makes it harder than what it needs to be because Brunskill is in solid position here. As he's catching that ball, just continue here to the inside. You have the big wall developing there. Just get vertical right here instead of trying to bounce it back to the outside. So thought that Brunskill did a good job here. Again, this is something that he is familiar with doing as an offensive lineman. Thought he did, just fine on this one. All right, this is going to be counter solid. The execution's a little funky here. In a perfect world, what you're doing is blocking everybody down. Maybe getting a combo here up to 55. You're going to get Tanner Connor coming in motion, and then he's going to be your kick out guy. And then Ingold leads up to 36, and you're trying to get Brunskill down here to seal number 40. But you're going to get this defensive end stepping down with Brunskill and making that kick out kind of tough. And you can see how that muddies things up for Ingold as he's coming through. So as we watch this play develop, here comes the motion from Connor. And again, you can see that edge player is tight on Brunskill. Connor's trying to kick him out. You can see Brunskill's eyes are down to number 40. You're going to have Ingold trying to come across, initially looking to get to 36. I think because of how cloudy everything was here, he looked to bounce that a little bit. And they get a little bit of something out of it. But in terms of Brunskill, I thought that he did just fine on this play in terms of stepping down, being able to absorb that contact a little bit. Right, we've seen some of our other guys just get completely knocked off course there, but he's still able to basically fight through two defenders to get to his assignment at number 40 and, doing a good enough job as an individual performance on that play. Now we're going to get a counter solid the other way, so this is going to go to the left. We're going to get the fullback and the other tight end blocking across, so everybody here is blocking down, and we're going to get Brunskill climbing and trying to seal on the backside here. And that's exactly what you get. You can actually see that kind of a fold block there where Larry Borum blocks out to the defensive end, gives a little fake there, and then Brunskill climbs. So exactly what you're looking for from Brunskill on that play. Got a couple more here. Another counter solid here. So like we talked about before, this is all just everybody blocking down. I think that, had the combo of Strange and Brewer been able to work up to 55 here, that would have been in better shape. Brunskill has the kick out block there, and then we're going to get Ingold coming through to 36. And as we see, Brunskill is going to do a good job just kind of walling off the defender. You can see everything building here except for 55 having a clean release through, and how that affects Achan's angle instead of being able to get through that lane. But in general, right, just talking about Dan Brunskill, when we're talking about counter solid, we just want to be able to, even when we're not kicking out that defensive end with somebody coming across, we're just sealing here. Never allows that edge to get soft, and that's why we get the down blocks here and should have a lot of room to work here with Ingold getting through. Doesn't work out that way, but good job by Brunskill. Again, Brunskill in pass pro 17 really isn't rushing, more of a spy type zone drop, but Brunskill doing his job, I guess. And last play here for Brunskill as a tight end. So he's lined up as a wing here. This is going to be an outside zone to the left, and some tough angles overall running into this. But you can see kind of, would rather see him look like an offensive lineman and open up and run to that outside shoulder. but he kind of gets into a seal position, doesn't really get the seal there, but even if he had, would have been pretty tight lane there. Maybe would have preferred to see him on a smaller defender here, try to create a little more movement versus sealing, but small complaint for an overall pretty solid day as the sixth offensive lineman. All right, so on the way out here, just talking about Brunskill as that sixth offensive lineman. Definitely like the different concepts they use, the different things they asked him to do. Still stuff that he can clean up, but I like the idea of continuing to do it. Definitely should see it on a short week here going to Baltimore. I think that if he can continue to clean up some of that stuff, like the miss on the split flow action and, some of those down blocks where his landmarks are a little bit off, I think this can continue to be a big part of the offense. We're not talking 50%, but if we can get, 8 to 10 plays a game where we are able to bring in a sixth offensive lineman and teams know that we're going to run the ball and they're able to still do it, and you still have some passing options off of that as well. You need guys to win their one-on-one matchups a little more, but when you're talking about guys like Waddle and Achane, it doesn't always hurt to keep an extra body in the passing game. And, maybe someday we will see Daniel Brunskill leak out and catch a big man touchdown for the Dolphins as well. As always, appreciate you guys watching. Leave some comments below. Come find me on X at OLCoachSmith63, and let's keep talking about the offensive line through the short week and get ready for Baltimore that I will be in attendance for. Thanks for watching.
They got a big run right here by Achane. Breaking tackles, downfield he goes.
Not a successful area for them.
3rd and 2 out of the backfield. It's Hill. Oh, he got by 1. 3rd down 8. Going deep, and he has the completion. Into 6 defensive backs. He'll swing one to the 10. It's Hill holding on.